Thank you for joining us today and helping us celebrate SBDC Day. SBDC Day is a national recognition of the impact America's small business development centers have on the success of small businesses. My name is Tracy Nyer, and I'm with the Virginia SBDC. The Virginia SBDC is the largest and most effective provider of customized counseling and education for small businesses in Virginia. Most of our services are offered locally in 28 locations throughout the Commonwealth. Today's webinar is one of our educational offerings and is part of our ongoing webinar series, Google and Beyond, Marketing and Managing on the Web. This series is designed to take a look at tools and techniques to help small businesses take their business to the next level. Today's topic is social media content curation done right. All of our Google and Beyond webinars are presented by Ray Sidney Smith, a web and mobile strategist, author of a Solo Mo Success, Social Media, Local and Web Small Business Marketing Strategy Explained, and president of W3 Consulting. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type those questions into the question window and Ray will do his best to answer them. Without further ado, here's Ray Sidney Smith.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you to the Virginia SBDC for having me here on the Google and Beyond Marketing and Managing on the Web series. As Tracy said, today we're going to be talking about social media content curation done right. Well, a couple of housekeeping items. As Tracy said, if you have any questions today and right now is the time to ask the questions. Feel free to ask those questions after the webinar. If you have a question or if you're watching the recorded version of this, feel free to go ahead and tweet at me. I'm always happy to answer questions on Twitter. Twitter is my platform, social platform of choice. Go ahead and hashtag that beyond Google. My email address will be on the final slide. So if you are more email focused, feel free to go ahead and email me and I'll be happy to answer questions via email as well. Go ahead and follow at Virginia SBDC to make sure that you stay abreast of new topics we'll be discussing in the future, as well as all of the other information and programs that the Virginia SBDC promotes through their Twitter channel. So go ahead and do that. Today's agenda is going to be a way for us to kind of demystify social media content curation. And so what I'm going to be doing is first defining content curation, because I think many small businesses have heard the term, they kind of know what it is, they kind of want to do it, and they don't really understand its function and place within the social media community building ecosystem. And so I want to kind of explain some of that, and we will do that. Then I want to talk about what done right means. What is appropriate, good, and best practices? How can you be excellent at social media content curation as a small business owner, which is taking your limited time, resources, money, what have you, and making that social media content curation work for your business? You really want to make sure that it's proving profitable as opposed to the antithesis of that. And then I'm going to show you how to do it. I'm going to walk you through literally creating the accounts and going through the process of actually setting up the tools. I'm going to use 3 particular tools, but as we'll talk about, you can choose your tools and do it the way you want to. But I wanted to show you the tools I use and how you can really set this up to be useful to you. And so we're going to walk through the demo. So I'm going to use the second half of our time together, really walking you through the creation of the accounts and setting up the content curation process so that you can really be effective by seeing it done. And even if you don't use those tools, it really will help you, having seen me set it up, how you can actually apply that to your own system and setup. And then we'll leave a little bit of time for Q&A. I'll leave a minute or two so we can answer questions, and I'll be happy to stay as long as we need to answer any questions that you have here live at the end. So that's our agenda for today. So let's get into what is social media content curation. I think all of us want to be able to create content for our businesses, but the reality is that if you want to spend 8 hours of your day on social media alone, go for it. But you're not going to have a profitable business, right? You just really can't spend that much time doing all of the work of creating original content for your target audience. And for the rest of our discussion today, I'm going to use community as the term for target audience, because that's what we're really doing here. In Solo Mo Success, the book that Tracy mentioned earlier, I talk about the idea of 3 fundamentals of the the social media space, right? You want to be listening, speaking, and connecting. Listening is the construct of being able to look for conversations and engage in those conversations that are already happening and exist on the web. Then there's speaking, which is publishing original content, and then connecting, which is engaging with your audience and making connections between them to make that community stronger. Well, social media content curation actually fits within the construct of listening. Okay, and so we're going to talk about it from that construct. How are you looking for conversations that are already happening? How are you looking at content that's already being published by other people and engaging with that content, curating that content to be able to make it useful for your audience, for your community, as well as for your business? So let's define social media content curation explicitly. Social media content curation is finding content from other original content producers or content creators and repurposing that content. And note that I say mindfully and appropriately, and we'll talk about that again, as fuel, as a repository for your community to have access to it. Okay, so it's really important for you to understand that when I talk about mindfully, I mean, you're not just going through your Twitter feed or through your Facebook feed and, you know, very impassionately or very impulsively, you know, it's like when you're in the checkout counter at the store. You don't just pick up every piece of gum from the counter. You have to be mindful about the fact that you might have a favorite piece of gum. You might note that one is sugar-free and one is not, and so therefore you might choose the one that has natural sugars or is sugar-free versus the other options. You know, you need to be mindful about the choices of content that you're using and curating to your audience, because they have discerning interests, and you need to be as discerning for them in the content that you create. And then appropriately, we'll get to that, because there are some right ways that you need to make sure that you curate content, and there are some wrong ways that you can do that, and we want to make sure that we cover those in the time that we have today. So that's social media content curation defined. All right, now we're going to move on to the components of social media content curation done right. And I've put this together into just a few basic guidelines that I'd like to cover for us to be able to do that. And so I'm gonna double back for a moment to listening and kind of explain listening just ever so little so that we can all be on the same page here. To do listening in the solo-mo success way, we want to make sure that, just like active listening, right? We hear someone speaking and then we repeat back to them what they're saying. Listening in the social media world is an active process. It's a process where we need to make sure that we are appropriately engaging with the people on the other side. To start out, though, it really makes sense to find out where the conversations are happening on the web, and whether that be on social networks, on Google, on news media sites. And so we need to then understand who and where our community is. So this is the first step. Who's your community? Okay. And so knowing your community is really important. So let's get to knowing your community. When it comes to social media content curation, it's really important for you to kind of stratify the various levels of your community. So your community, starting out at the most granular level, could be you, if you employ anyone, or if you have any vendors. Those people are part of your community. They're listening to the content you're producing. Maybe not on the same channels, but they are listening. And if they aren't, then you should really engage them in the process to be listening, because they can provide valuable feedback. There is the industry you're in. So you have colleagues. You have potentially, if you are in a regulated industry, you certainly have governmental agencies and other people involved, economic development authorities and other kinds of accrediting bodies, professional organizations, and that kind of thing that may be licensing you for what you do or accrediting what you do. You need to make sure that you know they're a part of your community. And again, this is for listening purposes, right? You want to be hearing what they're saying, because you might want to be engaging and curating that content from those sources. So looking at other influencers might be a part of the community. And then, of course, you have your target audience. And your target audience are the people who potentially can buy from you, or the people who can broadcast or syndicate your content to their own community, right? So if I have a group of people who follow me, then you want to make sure that you have that the content is appropriate for that kind of person who can now send that along and reshare it along. So knowing your community is just really important. I always recommend that you go out to Google and you look for blogs, news media, media outlets that are putting out stuff, YouTube for videos. You looking for a web-based email forum or lists where you might have industry, local, and community interest-based platforms. The one that comes to mind is Nextdoor, which is that neighborhood by neighborhood social network where people can interact and engage in a kind of email format, but it's actually a web platform. And then, of course, social channels: Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn groups, Instagram, Pinterest, Quora, Reddit, and Google Plus are the kind of primary ones that are really great for content curation purposes. Okay, now we need to figure out, once we've listened to the community by going out there and searching for conversations, we really need to figure out what content works well. Okay, so we're going to actually go through the community and start looking at content that has been engaged with positively, negatively, sentiment analysis I'll talk about in a moment, but we want to look at whether it's positive, neutral, or negative sentiment. We want to see if people reshared that content, quite a lot, not at all. If people responded to that content as that they liked the content, that they were, were they happy that it was produced and created? Were they not happy with it? Did they do the thing that the content author asked them to do? And we'll talk about that a little bit as well. So we want to know what subjects are being discussed, what's garnering the most engagement, and of course, positive, neutral, or negative sentiment. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about sentiment. So sentiment is something that we sometimes don't take into heart. We just want something that's shared a lot or liked a lot. But what does liking a post on social media really mean? Okay, what we really want to pay attention to are the comments that people make on posts. And in the case of Facebook, where you are capable of, giving a thumbs up, giving, a happy face, a sad face, and so on and so forth, we see some now mood or emotional response to those things. And we just lump them into basically positive, neutral, and negative sentiment. When you're doing this, you really need to pay attention to the fact that the substance of the content can actually determine whether or not the positive, neutral, or negative sentiment of the content is a good for the business or not. Okay, so for example, if you put out something very somber, right, it's natural that people are going to potentially respond to that with a high negative sentiment. That is, their mood or emotional response may be a lot of sad faces on Twitter, or their comments in the in the post will be of a negative nature, right? That's a negative sentiment because there's negative mood or affect that's being presented. But that's actually very positive for the business in the sense that they were able to put that information out there, and a lot of people emotionally responded to that in the appropriate way. Now, if a bunch of people smiled, say at the notice that someone passed away, say Stephen Hawking just passed away, right? And as a huge fan, I retweeted someone's eloquent rest in peace message on Twitter. Well, that was highly engaged with, and that's great. But if a bunch of people put a bunch of smiley faces as comments to that would be an inappropriate response for the business, right? Or for me personally, or what have you. It just wouldn't make sense if I got a bunch of people happy and excited that a brilliant scientist had passed away, right? So we want to make sure we're looking for the right sentiment response to the goal of that post. So just pay attention to those kinds of little things that we sometimes don't pay attention to. We go, oh, we got a lot of positive sentiment on all these posts. Well, was that the sentiment that you were looking for? So just make a note there to it. What you want to do now is kind of start to track and maintain the content that you're creating. So I am a spreadsheet person. I like to keep spreadsheets, and I think that everyone should. I've actually created a template for you, and I will have that linked at w3cinc.com/resources, and I'll have Tracy go ahead and email you out that link to the template so that you'll have that after the webinar. And so in the template, what I've done is I have made a list of the content sources and what medium on which they are getting the most engagement and the appropriate sentiment that I'm seeking. Okay, and so this is really important because you want to make sure that if you are going to be doing this work, you want to see the success or failure of these things so that you can be doing more of the things that are creating success and less of the things that are not. Okay, so I'm gonna send that along to you, and I'm not going to worry about really explaining much more of it here. But just know that there's a template you can use for kind of seeing how these things are working out. And I actually I could put a couple samples in the template so you can see kind of what it is that I'm looking for and how it's being set up. All right, next up, for content curation done right, you need to give appropriate attribution to content originators. Now, I know that a lot of people sometimes feel like they don't understand copyright laws and other kinds of things when it comes to social media. So I want to really kind of flesh it out here for you in the sense that, one, if you share someone's content, it's not just rude, but it's probably against some law, some provision of the copyright, at least in the U.S., for taking their content and just using it. You can't download people's images from Google. You can't just copy and paste content from other people's, websites or blog posts and put them into your own and go on with your day. You need to give appropriate attribution to those, and to a greater extent understand that appropriate attribution beyond, you might make a typical quotation of someone's, from someone's blog post, right? You copy out a sentence from someone's blog post and put those into quotes. Fine, you can go ahead and do that as long as you give appropriate attribution. But there's kind of a standard, that has been set in law that then says this is now, overstepping that bound. And at that point, people go, oh, well, I have fair use, fair use, fair use. I hear it all the time, right? But the reality is that fair use doctrine in law perspective is a defense. It is not it's not a right. You don't have a right to use other people's property. If they sue you, you have a defense. And that's what the fair use doctrine is. It's a defense. So it's only after they sue you do you have then the ability to defend yourself with the fair use doctrine. So don't go around, throwing fair use as your right to take somebody else's original content. That being the case, the world has adapted to being able to being able to curate content well, and that means using the functionality built within the social media platforms, the social networks that we already have and exist. So if you are sharing content within a social network, you can likely use the functionality, which is the reshare button. On Facebook, that would be a share. On Twitter, that would be retweet, and otherwise. Instagram actually doesn't have that functionality, so there are tools out there that allow you to do it. One on Instagram is called Repost, but you can actually manually do these things as well. And if you have questions about that, I can answer those as well. But if you're using any more than typical quotations or referencing where to find content, you must ask for the permission of the original content creator. If you're on a social network, then you get to provide, the social network provides that functionality, and actually within the terms of service or the terms of use of that network, they give you the right to use their functionality to be able to reshare content. So you're actually safe to just hit retweet on a tweet on Twitter. But that's not doing social content curation right. And that takes me to my next point, but I want to stop and actually cover one particular thing. So when you are using Twitter, when you're using WordPress specifically, WordPress actually has something called O-embed. So many small business owners use WordPress. So if you don't use WordPress, I'm sorry. But if you do use WordPress, great, because WordPress with O-embed gives you the ability to take any blog post from any other WordPress website. Okay, so walk this through with me. If you have a WordPress website and you are following someone who also has a WordPress website, all you need to do is to take the URL of the blog post that you want to reshare, and you can paste it on its own line. It has to be on its own line in your blog post, and then it will embed the blog post of that blog into yours, okay? And it does so in an appropriate fashion so that it gives credit to the person, it links back to that person's blog, and you now have a beautiful embedded post on which you can now curate the content. Okay, so just know that at least on the WordPress side, you're given this fantastic embed technology to be able to do that. All right, this brings us to what separates you from your competition. So the competition out there is either doing content curation well, and kudos to them, and now you need to step up your game and do it just as well or better than them. And it comes down to this one fundamental component of doing social media content curation right: commentary, correction, and calls to action. When you curate a piece of content, you can't just thoughtlessly retweet things, but even if you just retweet someone's post, that's okay. I mean, I do it all the time, right? If I'm on Twitter, I constantly retweet people's content. But the reality is if you want to do it really well, if you want to excel above the chatter, what you really need to do is provide one or both of one of these concepts, or a combination of these concepts. Let me discuss them very briefly. Commentary is the idea of adding thought, adding value to the post or the link or the tweet or the message or whatever the post type is that you're finding on a social network. So for example, I come across one of these, the ultimate guide to using Zapier. Zapier is an online internet service tool, and that does automation. So the ultimate guide to using Zapier. Oh, great. I see this post and I want to go ahead and curate that content to my community. Well, the reality is that even if it's the ultimate guide to Zapier for small business or what have you, it is not going to cover everything. There's just no way, okay? So I need to go in there and read the article, review it for what content it does cover, and then provide my own thoughts on it. It may even be that I'm just thanking the author of the blog post. I may decide that I want to add a little bit of information about a particular tool that Zapier connects to and allows an automation for. I need to provide something on top of that. Even if it's just a tweet, I need to add my thoughts to that content. That's what makes it curated, right? If you walk into a museum, you don't just see a bunch of paintings. If it's an art museum that has paintings, you don't just see a bunch of paintings on the wall with nothing, right? You see the painting on the wall, and typically what they'll have is the name of the artist, the year it was made, its medium, and the materials used to make it. Maybe it has a small vignette that describes the painting or some piece of history about why it was made, or that kind of thing. That's commentary. Okay, that's the kind of stuff that makes it worthwhile. And it's the organizing of those paintings into maybe a genre or a theme or some kind of exhibit that makes it even more valuable. That's doing content curation right. Okay, next up, you can correct things. And this is a very common thing. So this is either doing correction, critique, or clarification. Many times people put out posts and they may not provide the appropriate context for that post, and or it's relatable to someone else, or they make a clear error. It's just an error of statement or fact, and you go ahead and correct those. So you can easily use those opportunities where someone that you like, and trust, they still post something wrong, and you want to go ahead and correct them. Okay, so you can go ahead and critique pieces. For example, you can curate a book review, that someone has put out there about a book in your industry, and you can go ahead and add your own thoughts about that particular book if you've read it. Okay, so correction is another option. And then finally is how these combinations work. So correction and or commentary then can be combined with call to action. Now, not every curated piece of content is going to have a call to action, but many should. Okay, so you should really lean toward calling people to act so that you can see your influence metrics. But a call to action in general is the idea that you're asking them to do something. Okay, and it's not always buy from me. Okay, buy from me now is not really the call to action that people are going to respond to until you've given them enough value. But for example, a few months ago, I saw someone asking for interviewees for a leadership podcast. And so I thought, oh, well, that's really interesting. If these people think they're a leader in their in their industry. This woman, the co-founder and CEO of a leadership organization, she was looking for podcast guests. And I thought, oh, well, I'm going to reshare that. I'm going to, that's curated content I want people to see. And the call to action was for them to either comment on the post or reach out to the person who was looking for guests and to let me know, so that I knew that they had reached out to her, so that I could, let her know that they had, just in case she, had things fall through the cracks, and to make sure that she had guests for her podcast. So those are the kinds of things where, I'm calling people to act. I'm calling them to do something. It has relatively little to do with my business, right? But it has everything to do with the fact that I'm helping my community. Okay. Now you might have a sale that's coming up, right? And you see a piece of curated content that's on topic, and you want to let people know about the sale as well. You might call people to take advantage of your coupon code, or coming to your website, or coming to your retail store and getting that deal. Okay. That's also an appropriate call to action if that piece of curated content matches. Okay. Again, like I said, the best curated content are ones that have commentary and or correction, and combine that with a call to action. Okay. And last but not least, with the done right components, is that you need to set up your tools for efficient, effective use. It's so often that I see people using social media tools, and they don't know how to do this properly. So I want to talk about setting up your tools correctly, just very briefly, and then I'm going to move us into the Create framework and then into the demo, so that we have enough time for it. So setting up your tools for effective use. One is you really need to make sure that you choose the tools that can do 80% of what you need to do. Okay? This whole idea that you need your tool to be perfect sometimes thwarts progress. Okay? Lean into progress. Don't lean into perfection, because it's just going to create a lot of inertia. Choose the tools that are able to do 80% or more of what you need to do, and be comfortable with what's called, in science, we call this satisficing. Psychologists call that satisficing. So it's like good enough has to be good enough. All right. And many times you might choose another tool to do one thing and choose another tool to do another thing, because each of them does 80% of that work well enough. Okay. But many times, and I'm a technology trainer, I spend my time with clients teaching them how to use tools, and what I learn often enough is that they don't know how their tools work. So they use one tool and they go, great, that does 80% of my work, and I have this other tool and it does 80% of that job really well. And what they didn't know is that the first tool they had, well, it does 100% of the work they needed to do, right? Or 99.9% of the work they needed it to do. And so now they've been fracturing their focus by trying to learn two tools instead of just learning one fully. So if you choose a tool, even if it works 80% of the time, but it does 99.9% of the work you need it to do, it is not worth changing to another tool, paying for another tool, spending the time and energy to make that movement. Okay? There are appropriate times to change tools. I totally get it. But if you have a tool and you're using the tool, you need to learn that tool fully. Okay? It's so often that I see people going around and thinking, oh, well, I found this other tool, and they go on the hunt for finding this other tool, and now they have 15 tools that should be doing the job. One tool should be doing the primary job of all of those. Okay? Now, this also comes down to the factor that you should choose as few tools as you can to do the most work. This is a do as I say, not as I do moment. Okay? My job is to learn about these tools and technologies to teach small business owners how to use them and to market and manage their businesses. So I use a lot of tools. Okay? I use many, many tools. Do not do what I'm doing. Okay? It's not a good thing for you. Okay? But as you are able to, choose as few tools as you can, learn those tools fully, and as long as they do 80%, the standard is 80%, give or take, right? But more or less 80% of what you need it to do, then don't go looking for the next best thing, okay? Because the thing you're using, as long as you know its weaknesses, you can likely overcome those, and that will be more productive than less for your business. Okay. So we're going to be talking today about 3 specific tools, and like I said at the top, they're the tools that I'm showing you today. You could easily choose other tools and to do this, but I wanted to use 3 tools that I know that can be combined together. So we'll use those 3 tools today. Before I jump into the demo, I'm kind of jumping over to the workflow process here, but I wanted to do this because I want to go over to the demo and not have to flip back and forth between the presentation slides and otherwise. So I'm going to walk you and talk you through the workflow, and then we're going to talk about it again after I do the setup of the tools. So just take this material and have it absorb, and then we'll come back to it on it. But I decided to just create an acronym so that it would be easier to remember. And so I used the Curate acronym for content curation. And so the Curate acronym allows you to be able to just quickly run through a checklist in your mind so that you're able to remember what the appropriate items are that need to be done. First up in the Create framework, the content curation framework, is capture content to curate, right? So you need to be able to be constantly capturing content for curation, right? You can't ever stop, okay? Because the moment you stop, then you're not going to find timely material, you're not going to be on top of your profession, you're not going to be on top of your industry, and you're not going to have your ear to the ground as it relates to being sensitive to what's going on in your community. Okay, this is really important that you need to always be capturing. Another one of the ABCs within solo success, right? You need to always be capturing, and you always need to be creating. The reality is that you don't have to do a lot of it. 5 minutes in the grocery store line, you can be capturing content from social networks. You have 15 minutes between 2 meetings, you have an opportunity to read a couple of articles and review them. So that's the next step. You need to read the potential curated content. So often I see people retweeting stuff that they clearly haven't read, because once you open the link or you watch the link to the video or what have you, you recognize that it completely is counter to their values. And so they've just retweeted some piece of content and made themselves look foolish, okay? Do not do this. If you capture a piece of content, sure, you read the title, you thought it was worth capturing, throw that into a holding space, which I'll talk about shortly, and you've got it in kind of a holding repository for review later. But once you decide that is going to be something that you might curate, then you need to read that content. You need to consume it fully, okay? Next is that you elect your curated content winners, okay? These are the pieces of content that you decide are actually going to go out to your community, okay? And so they need to be of a high enough caliber, a standard that you set, right? And everybody will have a different standard, but you're going to decide what is that standard of curated content that's going to go out there. Is it going to be a particular length? Is it going to be of a particular, is it going to be from a particular authority so that it's of a particular standard? You decide what those things are going to be, right? Is it going to be something that's much more salesy in nature or much more, rich in substance in nature? You set the standard, all right? But you're going to elect your curated content winners at that point. Next up is the add value space. And the add value step is where we add commentary, correction, and or a call to action. And this is the space where within the Create framework, you are now working or operating in your tool that allows you to draft it. So it would be WordPress if you have a WordPress website. It would be in Twitter or Facebook. At this point, you're writing the content in there and saving it as a draft. You might use a tool like I'm going to show you today, like HootSuite, but you can use Buffer or CoSchedule or otherwise. And now you're taking that curated content, you're posting it into your tool, and now you are drafting your value into it. You're adding your value into it. Next up, you're going to tailor your content to the medium, right? So if you have a 600-word piece of commentary with a link and an image, that's not going to fit on Twitter. So you need to now cull it down to the 280-character limit of Twitter. You need to do something to it to make sure it fits to the platform. If it's a Facebook post, great. If you have 600 words, if you have just one sentence, that might not be enough for Facebook for it to really stand out. Or maybe it's missing an image to really draw people's attention to it. Or maybe you need to record a video for YouTube for it to be a piece of curated content for your YouTube channel, right? Make sure that the curated content matches the platform. Even if you're not creating original content, you can't do this, sort of halfway. You need to make sure that the platform is going to perceive that as valuable enough content. So you need to tailor it also to the medium. Next up is the kind of ongoing evaluation and engagement with your community. After you start posting to your social feeds, you're going to start to see people engaging with that content. So of course, evaluation is using the social listening template that I'll send along to you, and then the requisite engagement with your community when you see people commenting on posts, asking questions, and of course, if people share your post onto other people, then you want to make sure that you thank them, show gratitude, show recognition for them being able to do that. But if you consistently use the Curate framework, you're going to be consistently creating good content. Always be capturing, make sure that you read the content that's being put out there. You elect your content winners and you set that off to the side. You then write your value, right? You create the value that you're going to add, whether that be comment, correction, or call to action, You tailor it, make sure it fits the social network that you're putting it out to, right? If it's Instagram, then it needs to be appropriate to Instagram. If it's Twitter, it needs to be appropriate and short enough for Twitter. And then again, you want to be evaluating, tracking the things that you're curating and properly gauging them for whether or not they were successful. And then of course, respond to your community, right? If they're talking to you, that would be like me and you standing in a cocktail party and I'm talking to you and you're just staring out the window, right? It's rude. And the internet is a mechanism for communicating with one another. Social networks are very similar in the social constructs that we have in real life. You should talk to people that talk back. You should talk back to the people who are talking to you, right? That's the appropriate way in which we do that. All right. So I covered a lot of material here, but I did it quickly so we could hop over to the demo side. So you can see really what we're doing, and as we make our way through this, hopefully you'll learn a little bit about what is going on. So here, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and set up a couple of things. First and foremost, we are going to hop into a tool called HootSuite. And HootSuite is a social media management dashboard. And in full disclaimer, I'm one of the HootSuite global brand ambassadors, but it's a volunteer role. I don't get paid by HootSuite, but I really love the tool, and it's fantastic for being able to consolidate multiple social network channels into one tool. Okay, and there's some fundamentals about how it works that I think is really helpful to us all in learning how it all can be set up. So here, I'm going to go ahead and set up a free account just so I can show you how to do this, and then we can kind of go on from there. But let's go ahead and click on sign up. And let's see, it's not allowing me to because it recognizes that I am already a member. So we're going to open up a new window, and it doesn't like that either. There we go. Click sign up. All right, so you can get a 30-day free trial. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And so let's just go ahead and do this. We're going to choose a password. And here we go. Oh, it recognized me. It's going to ask me to log into PayPal. It's going to send me a text message to make sure it verifies who I am. Right. You can obviously use a regular credit card as well, but I'm using PayPal for ease of sake here. Okay. So again, you can use the free version. I just happen to be setting up the professional version just for the purposes of our discussion here today. But what I'm going to do now is, once you've created the account and decided whether you want the free version, which allows you only 3 social profiles, here I want to be able to use more than 3 profiles. So, you know, that's you'll just pay whatever the requisite fee is. Then we go ahead and set up our social networks. So first we're going to add Twitter. So let's click on Twitter. It's going to ask us to go ahead and log into our Twitter account. And so I've gone ahead and connected it, but it seems to have errored on me. So let's try this again. Keeps erroring, so I'm not going to do Facebook because that's way too much more work. I'm going to just add LinkedIn. All right, and then it's going to also text verification. Again, this is all two-step verification for purposes of security. And we're going to use W3 Consulting here. Oh, this is all owned by HootSuite. Yeah. So, so one of the issues is that I already have these set up in an account, so it's going to try and stop me from doing these. I'm going to use my personal, which is going to take ownership of, which is fine. You're going to choose your company company page. Okay. So just bear with me here. All right. Then we're going to go to Google Plus, and we're going to connect them, and we'll see how this all works out. So we're going to use this one. And we're going to go there. And again, it's going to verify me against my phone. Yes, this is me, and it will log me in. And so what we're doing here is we're actually connecting against these profiles so that, again, it's going to tell me that it's already taken. So let's do that page again. It's already taken as well. I'm just trying to find a network that is not already managed by my Hootsuite. So clearly I learned something today, which is that Hootsuite will not let you have, be managing multiple ones at a time. But we'll just use LinkedIn as an example here, and we'll continue. But let's just pretend that I connected all of my social networks to my one Hootsuite account. Now, once I've done that, I can now share users in Hootsuite to other people that I might delegate. So if I eventually outsource to social media manager, or if I have a staff member on my staff who wants to do that, I can go ahead and do that. You put in your name of your company. You choose an industry. We're just going to say agency, and then we'll say 1 to 20, and a phone number 202 955 1212, and click all done. All right, so we've set up Hootsuite. And now we come to the Hootsuite dashboard, okay? And so this is our first step in all of this. Now, the most important part about Hootsuite is its auto-scheduling functionality. So if we click up here in the top right-hand corner, we'll be taken to our profile settings, and we're going to click on Accounts and Settings, okay? So under Accounts and Settings, we have this option that's called Auto Schedule, okay? So we're going to scroll down under the Settings window, click on Auto Schedule, and you can see here, Hootsuite gives us the ability to choose when content goes out. And say that I only want content going out Monday through Friday, and I only want one post a day, one piece of curated content to go out a day. And it could be also original content, but say I only want one piece of content to be published across my networks per day. And I choose that I want between basically 10 and 5 p.m. because I decide that that's when I want my content to be going out in front of people. So I click Save. And this is really important because now Auto Schedule is going to allow me to schedule things with Hootsuite that I'm curating, and it's going to automatically put it into the time that into the next available time slot in my calendar for publication on my behalf. Okay, so this is the first step. Set up my auto scheduler. in Hootsuite and say that if I have 5 social networks in here, now if I want to curate content, I can go ahead and do that. All right, next tool. Next tool is called Feedly, and Feedly is a capture tool for us to be able to add content sources to our space so that we can go ahead and consistently be capturing stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with Feedly. I'm going to click on Get Started. Again, we're going to go through this little process of making sure that we set up a Feedly account. In this case, you can sign up using any of the options it provided. I'm just going to use the one that they've given me here, which is to set up a native account with Feedly. And we're going to just create a password here and click Create Account. Okay. Now, what's going to happen is, and by the way, if you use G Suite or Google account, I would recommend using that because it's really easy to not have to remember many passwords because you can just log in through Google. Same thing with HootSuite. So you don't have to use HootSuite's login mechanism. You can just use a Google account to log in. When you're taken into Feedly, the most important things that you need to think about today. I mean, in general, you can learn much more about Feedly, but the idea is that you can add sources. That could be specific search terms, it could be specific blog posts, it could be any number of things to the platform here. And so just for a little bit of giggles, I'm going to choose cats, okay? And so I'm going to do a search for cats, dogs, and fish, all right? And those are the 3 areas where I want to consistently be curating content because I know that my audience is really into cats, dogs, and fish, okay? So I go ahead and search Feedly here, and you can see that I have searched cats, and it gave me this little hashtag option to look for things that were associated with cats, okay? And so I can see Iken has cheeseburger, and there's a couple of other, blogs here that are about other topics, but what have you, I've gone ahead and I've done the search for cats, and I want to now add this blog to my list of places that I want to follow. Now, again, going back to where we talked about, this could be a professional industry organization blog, this could be a podcast, this could be a series of a video series that's being published on someone's website. If it has the ability to be a feed, what's called an RSS feed, then we're capable of tracking it here within Feedly. And we can even go beyond that using Google-based keyword alerts, which I'll show you in a moment. But let's just say for sake of argument, I go ahead and I want to follow Iken has cheeseburger, okay? So I go ahead here and I click on follow, and it asks me to follow this source and create a new feed, okay? Now, in that feed name, it's going to show up in this left-hand panel here. See where this feeds is? It's asking me to put it in a category. What we're going to do is we're going to create a category for each of our major themes about which we curate content. So I'm going to choose cats, right? Makes sense. I'm going to click on cats. And in this process now, I could add 5, 10, 15 blogs or podcasts or searches for things about cats, right? So I could go here and I could say, I want to look for people that talk about the American puma, okay? And I only want content about the American puma, and I want anything that comes up in Google News about that, all right? And again, this is blocked because it's a pro feature. You would have to upgrade to Feedly to be able to do it, but for $5 a month, you can spare it to be able to do this. Okay, so you can go ahead and do that. I'm not going to do that for purposes of here, just because it's going to waste too much time. But anyway, so we're going to go back, and I'm going to go ahead and set up my next feed category. I'm going to look at dogs. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click on dogs from websites. And I Has a Hot Dog is a great website to follow if you're tracking information, funny things about dogs, right? So I'm going to click on a feed name, and I'm going to create a new feed name called dogs, right? So now see, dogs is cats is a category, dogs is a category, and we're going to do the same thing now for fish. Again, I'm going to go ahead and follow anything about dogs, and I'm going to add it to the dogs one. I'm going to add a few trusted sources for content for cats and so on and so forth, right? And the advanced Aquarius, great. I'm going to go ahead and add him to a new feed called fish, or her. And now I have 3 feed categories: cats, dogs, and fish. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create boards for each of them, because this is kind of the fire hose. Okay, this is the information that's coming in every day. This is the stuff you're going to do when you're standing in the grocery store line and you have some time to kill. You're waiting for your kids to come out of soccer practice, and you're sitting in the car waiting for them to come to the car, right? You've got minutes of the day where you can go ahead and you can now quickly jump into the cat section and say, okay, cool, this is information. These titles look interesting. Oh, you know what? This one about when the dog takes over the bed comic. Well, that's not really about cats, that's about dogs. So I want to go ahead and save this to an area that I can curate for dogs, okay? And this takes us to the next section, which is the concept of boards. So we're going to create a board, and we're going to call this one dogs because this, even though it's on I Can Has Cheeseburger, it's actually about dogs. And so we're going to create the dogs board. I'm going to create the other ones now just so we have it. And we're going to create one for fish. Now what I have is 3 categories, dogs, cats, fish, and 3 boards, cats, dogs, fish, right? And now whenever I curate content from the fire hose, I now have the content winners, the ones that I want to curate here under cats, dogs, and fish. So I have the short list of items that I know that I want to be able to share out, okay? Now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to click on this link when I decide that I'm going to actually consume the article. I'm gonna actually read the article, right? And so here goes a funny comic. Oh, that's interesting. I wanna go ahead and share it as an example. And you're gonna actually open it up by clicking on the name of it, and now you have the actual blog post open. This is important that you have the actual, full link to the article here outside of Feedly, especially if you're gonna use the free version, okay? So now what you have is the full article. HootSuite has what's called the Hootlet, which is a web browser extension that allows me to go ahead and click on the little HootSuite Hootlet, and it opens up a window that allows me to go ahead and share it to my network. Okay, it's going to ask me to go ahead and log in if I need to log in, and if I'm already logged in, it's going to log me in. And now voila, it opens up a little window and it gives me some information to go ahead and curate it. Now, if I have the time, I could go ahead and add value right here. So I can add commentary, I can add correction, and or call to action. Okay, this is so funny. Okay, if I wanted to, I could add more value here in commentary, critique, and or call to action. All right, for sake of argument here, let's presume that I did that. Okay, and so now HootSuite is basically doing the rest of the work for me, because once I've done this, I just click on auto schedule. When I click on auto schedule, it's now going to put it into my publisher, into the HootSuite publisher, for the next time slot available in that time frame that it thinks my audience will go ahead and see this content. Okay. Now, if you know a specific time you want it to go to, you can always post it later and choose a specific time. Okay. I always recommend that you use the email me when the message is sent, so that you know whether or not something has been sent or not. Okay. But either way, I didn't do that, but you could just click on auto schedule and it will then put it into the next time slot that is open for you. Okay. So you're just going to keep repeating that process, right? Whenever you have time, you're going to be going to the feeds, all right, and capturing content. And then whenever you're using, whenever you have more time, you're going to go to your boards and you're going to look at the content that you've elected as curated content winners, and you're going to go ahead and add value, make it appropriate to the networks, and then you're going to share it out to HootSuite. Now, again, if you don't want to use the HootSuite Hootlet, you could very easily do the same thing. Let's go up back to here, and we see here goes some funny I Can Has Cheeseburger Facebook challenge, right? So there's a Facebook challenge. This would be a great opportunity for a call to action kind of thing, right? So you can actually also take this link and go over to the Compose, and we're in the beta version of the Compose now, so we can actually choose these for that, and so I can write a message here with value, right? So my commentary, critique, or otherwise, and then I can paste the link here, and HootSuite will go ahead and shorten this to track it for us, and so we can go ahead and see whether or not something has happened, and HootSuite will do that for us, and so we're going to use there's no preset. We're just going to apply, and it should shorten it for us. Oh, well, it doesn't matter. Whether it's shortened or not doesn't really matter here. The point is that now we get to see in the compose window how this will look. We're going to see our added value, the commentary or otherwise that we're sharing, and the link to our post with the way it's going to display. Okay, and then again, if we want to publish it immediately, we can, or we can go ahead and schedule it for the next time we want it to go out. In the beta, by the way, you're not seeing the auto schedule functionality because it's not yet available, but it will be. Until then, you can use the old compose option up here and just use it under under the schedule functionality. You can click on auto schedule, and then it will place it into the publisher. So in that same scenario, added value message goes here. Then you paste your link. And you can go ahead and then see under auto schedule. I'm just going to click on auto schedule. And now under the publisher, you can see that this has been added for publication later. Okay. Now, if you decide that you don't, you can't finish that piece of thing right now, note that it saves things so you can go ahead and edit a draft later within HootSuite, which is what I really like, because you can go ahead and here and say, okay, well, I wrote this for LinkedIn, but I really want to redraft this for Twitter. And so you can go in and copy this message over to Twitter and then cull it down to be under 280 characters. Okay, so that's just, those tools allow you to be able to do it. The social listening template lets you go ahead and do the listening necessary to track and maintain the things that are of interest to your audience, things that you might want to curate in general, and then to track further your own content that does really well. You want to start tracking the things that do really well and potentially create your own original content based on those topics, right? So if you see a particular thing that is doing really well on social media, you might decide, you know what, I want to create my own content because this thing gets a lot of curation. So learning from your curated content is also really, really powerful. Okay, so again, I did this kind of haphazardly and kind of with funny topics, but recognize the power of what we're really doing here. We're capable of going into a system using HootSuite and Feedly and just a spreadsheet, and we're capable of now doing the whole entire social media content curation function in a very clean and sophisticated way that allows us to be able to streamline the process and to make it work for us as opposed to not. And this creates greater engagement, right? It creates an ability for us to be able to then interact and engage with our community in a way that we know they're going to enjoy, because at the outset, you're going to have to use a little bit of guessing, a little bit of intuition, but over time, you're going to see what actually works, and then you can start looking for curated content that you know will work, and you then can start filling in the gaps. One of the questions that people frequently ask, of course, is what's the level between how often I should post my own original content versus the content that I am curating? I usually use a 50-50 rule here, and it's actually 5-3-2, the 5-3-2 ratio. And the 5-3-2 ratio is 5 curated posts will match up with 3 original pieces of content, and then 2 what we call connecting in Soloma success, right? So listening, speaking, and connecting. So 5 pieces of listening content, 3 pieces of original content, 2 pieces of connecting. Okay, and that means you're engaging with your audience in some way, shape, or form, and that really is very helpful. So when you are first starting out, you might actually curate, 9 to 1, right? Every 9 one piece of original content you create, you are curating 9. But then eventually you want to get to closer to the 50-50 state, where most of the content you are creating is still social media curation with 5 posts, but then 3 of your posts are your own original content, and 2 are ones that engage with your audience. That could be testimonials, that could be you introducing one person in your community to another publicly, right? Showing that public connection, and then taking it offline and finishing off the introduction, so that they have private contact information and why they should connect and all these other things. So connecting in your community is the ability of doing public recognition. Maybe someone in your industry, someone in your community has gotten an award, has made some kind of accomplishment. You want to show that public recognition, and that's connecting your community with one another, and that creates stronger bonds, right? But you want to constantly be working on how do you curate content so that you don't have to be generating it all in as seamless a fashion as possible. So at this point, Tracy, I'm happy to open up questions and then we can close out, and I'm happy to stay and answer any other questions that we have.
Great. Thank you, Ray. Great presentation as always. I'm going to go ahead and close out because we do have quite a few questions, and I will apologize in advance. Some of them are from earlier in the webinar. I had some technical difficulties and lost the question window for a while. So I wasn't able to intersperse them in the webinar. But thank you, everyone, for participating today. Today's webinar was recorded, and it'll be posted on the Virginia SBDC website under live webinars and recordings. Tomorrow, you'll be receiving a follow-up email on this webinar, and there'll be an evaluation link in it. Please help us to continue to improve our training by taking the time to complete the evaluation. Our next webinar is on April 5th, and it's how to create an affiliate program for your small business. So I will start with the questions, and we'll go with the most recent first. Do you recommend WordPress above other blogging software? Does the whole site need to be WordPress or only the blog?
So the short answer is yes, but I wouldn't go ahead changing everything just because I say use WordPress. Okay, if you have a current website and you can have a blog on that website, then use the tool you're currently using. WordPress is a dynamic and powerful tool, but there's no reason to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. So if you want to email me, I'll go ahead and put my email address on the slide. If you have a specific question and want to give me further details about what your current situation is, I'll be happy to talk to you, and we can make an assessment as to whether or not you should change, or whether you should continue on the way you are and maybe just adding another tool there or another platform for you to be able to put out original content or to be curating content by adding value to blog posts that you do see. Especially if all you're going to do for your content creation purposes for some time going forward is adding commentary to other blog posts you find on the internet, then WordPress just makes it so brutally simple that would make a lot of sense.
Expanding on WordPress, is there a preferred web host?
No. I would be in full disclaimer. I have a web hosting service, so I can't say that without being biased. So no, you find solid WordPress hosts all over the place. I mean, you can find really great web hosting services. And the one thing you do want to pay attention to is that it's managed WordPress hosting, okay? And you want to find a managed WordPress host because they handle then backup and security and updates within the portal for you, okay? You don't want to have to be managing that stuff for yourself. So as long as it's a managed WordPress host, that's what you're looking for.
Okay. Does CoSchedule offer a listening feature?
CoSchedule does offer a functionality for searching, but in the concept of how I define listening, it's not as robust as other tools. But I would reach out to CoSchedule and have them show you how their search feature works for it, and then they can do a demo for you. But it's not going to be full listening like in Hootsuite. Hootsuite gives you a much more robust ability to search against a lot of different things. And for example, today I talked about Feedly. You can almost do everything I talked about with Feedly inside Hootsuite. Okay, so you really could. I just like Feedly, and so I like the connection of having a holding ground for materials so that you have a differentiation between kind of the fire hose of content that you're looking and scanning and skimming for content that might be good versus the content that you decide is good to read and to really understand so that you can then curate it well. Feedly is a nice way station. So I like the two tools together for it, but Hootsuite does a really fantastic job of pulling all those pieces together. I would say that CoSchedule would allow you to do some of that, but not all of it.
Okay. What tools may we use to build community? Is this developed from our email Excel spreadsheet?
Right. So community is one of those things that you build from the ground up from the people you already know. And so if you are well known in your community, that is your usually your geographic community or your professional community, then it's going to be easier to build your community because you're already known. Right. It's kind of like high school, right? People knew who the it kids were, right? And they had their own particular prestige and celebrity in that space. And so if whatever they did, there was going to be a following created out the gate. And if you were less well known in the school, if you were less popular, so to speak, it's going to be a little bit of a more uphill challenge for you because you're not so well known. But that doesn't mean you can't get well known. It just means that you have to do hard work. You have to do the harder work of building your community person by person. So the great part about the internet is that it reduces the geographic barrier. But if you have a local business, you still need to be geographically situate about how you make those connections. So it's a lot of offline marketing, right? You're going out there and, what I call shaking hands and kissing babies, right? In the political joke. You want to go out there and you want to go to networking events. You want to, tell people to connect with you on social networks. But you also want to email the people you know already to follow you. You want to let your customers know that they can follow you on social media. Do all of that kind of community building on at least the front end in terms of using all the publicity vehicles that you have available to you.
Great. What is the minimum post I should post per week to keep my audience engaged, and what is too much?
Right. So you can actually watch the number of people who stop following you as the too much statistic. Okay. But in general, you're not going to be able to create too much content. There is a just right amount of content, and that's the amount of content that generates enough traffic to your website to make your business profitable. Okay. And then too little is like kind of the minimum. So in the blogging, podcasting, YouTube channel world, they usually say about one original piece of content per week. Okay, and that means you can kind of curate the rest of those pieces. If you're posting Monday through Friday, 4 posts are going to be curated content, 1 post is going to be original content. But then you still need to figure out the appropriate ratio for how that all works. So it really depends on your business and your community. If you cater, say, to other business owners, you may not need to post as often. But if you cater into the real estate world, you need to be posting 4 and 5 times a day to be able to create the profitable leads to be able to make your business, satisfy your revenue needs. So it really is very dependent upon your unique situation, your unique industry, and you starting out with 1 blog post a week or 1 podcast episode or 1 video per week is usually a good metric to start with, and then curate the content for the rest of the time. And then over time, you want to get to that kind of 50-50, 50% curated content, and then 50% is original content plus engaging and public recognition and connecting with your community.
Okay. Do you recommend keeping the link in the post or deleting it once the link graphic pops up?
Can you repeat that question? I'm sorry.
Do you recommend keeping the link in the post or deleting it once the link graphic pops up?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so you definitely want to leave the link in the post. And if this comes to like tailoring it to your medium, right? The appropriate way to credit someone, to give appropriate credit or contribution on Twitter, for example, I would put via and then @ symbol and the person's username or profile. And if I found someone's retweet plus the link. If I found someone who retweeted it, I would hat tip them, the H/T, which stands for hat tip, or, showing recognition for someone who curated a piece of content. I would hat tip the person who originally retweeted it, and then also mention the original content creator, because it's just appropriate. I mean, it's good to give recognition to the person who shared it, even if you don't know that person, and then to the original content creator, because maybe they'll like or retweet your added value, right? It gives them an opportunity to say, yeah, I wrote this post, but you added value that I think my audience would actually also appreciate. And therefore, I'm going to retweet this. And now, instead of you just showing your smaller community, you're now opening yourself up by being retweeted for the value you've added to a much larger community.
Great. Any comments on Zoho Social for managing social media?
I honestly, I've created an account and have played with it for about 5 minutes, and it frustrated me too much to actually continue. So, so I think that might be my commentary, but I don't know the tool well enough to say that it would work for me if I actually, rolled up my sleeves and gave it the good college try. I just haven't spent a lot of time with it, so I don't know. I found the interface to be just a little bit clunky. But if you have a real need to want to try it out, and you're already on the Zoho platform, if you're using other Zoho products, I don't particularly encourage you to jump from that just because the interface is clunky. If it works for you, it works. The functionality needs to be there first. And if that's going to make it more streamlined for you, then go for it.
Great. Do you have any Instagram specific recommendations regarding posts, maybe the image or the way that you present the content?
Sure. So there's an application called Repost, Repost, and that's really the primary application where you can actually curate content well. Because it automates the process of pulling the image from Instagram, putting it into your own post, and then providing the appropriate attribution credit to the person who you're reposting. I don't like the way in which Repost kind of does it all, but it does it well enough, and that I use it, and so Repost is really great for that. If you're going to do it some other way, you then have to manually do things, which is it's a nightmare. I'm hoping that Instagram will give us a functionality for being able to reshare people's content at some point in the future, but at the present moment, they're not doing that. Hootsuite as well as Buffer have recently garnered the access to be able to post original content directly from the desktop application, which is fantastic. And so now you can publish from Instagram and schedule posts, directly from Hootsuite into Instagram. So that's a great addition, because I really don't like using mobile applications when I'm trying to do social media content creation. So I like being able to work from the desktop, and now with Instagram I can do that. And but with Curation, you really do have to use the mobile app, because Repost is doing all of that work on your phone for you.
Great. Are there any specific tools to help with photo quality?
Well, if you go to w3cinc.com and under resources, there is a master cheat sheet for social media image sizes, and inside that, at the very top of that page, there is a link to a couple of programs that give you the ability to create templates. One of them is Canva, for example. Canva gives you a template on which to operate. So what you would do is, say, use the social media template, which is an 800 by 800 pixel image. But you could go in there and choose the appropriate size for other things. So you can say Instagram. So for Instagram, you post it in there. And now what it's going to do is, when you upload the image to Canva, and Canva now has iOS and Android applications, so you have mobile applications, so you don't have to do this on your desktop necessarily. But what it now does is it takes that image, and when you upload it and paste it into the Canva image, it's going to give you the appropriate dimensions, the appropriate way in which it should show, so that you're not going to stretch the image. You're going to place it on the canvas itself, and if it's not big enough to be, to fit, it's just not big enough. So you can move it around on the template, put some words there to fill in any space. You can change colors of the background to really keep the aspect ratio good, the image crisp, and still be able to download a good image on the other side. So I really like using Canva for that kind of stuff, where you can even if an image is not quite appropriately sized, you can crop it in Canva and retain, not skew it, keep good pixel density, and still come out with a good image. So I would use Canva.
Great. if you aren't using Hootsuite, how else can you share Feedly stuff across your network, blogs, etc.?
So Feedly Pro, the paid program, actually has built-in functionality to share out to social media. So you can actually use Feedly itself to be able to do that. I just happen not to have showed that today because I didn't log into my own personal Feedly account or the business Feedly account, which has pro features, but it automatically shares to Hootsuite, for example. But you can actually then set it up to share out to Twitter and Facebook and so on and so forth from there. Now it's directly to the network, so it doesn't have the ability to schedule unless your network has that functionality. Like Facebook, the network itself has the ability to function sometimes schedule posts, but with Feedly, you can in real time share curated content directly from Feedly, but you have to have the pro version.
Okay. And the last question, this has been a great question session today.
Yeah.
And I don't recognize this program. So what do you think of, is it Ripple, RIPL?
Yeah, so it's for creating videos. If I'm not, I didn't know. I don't know if it does images, but I believe it's only video. But again, it's a fantastic tool. I think it's totally worth checking out, especially if you're doing a lot of video for Instagram. And so yeah, I think if you're using it, go keep doing it. That's a great tool. It's a great, for others who are listening, you should check it out. RIPL. It's a little video editing tool, so you can create, videos for Instagram. Instagram limits you to 10 seconds for videos that you're posting as a part of a story, and so it gives you those kinds of that functionality to be able to really create video quickly.
Great. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, everyone, for participating today. Great session.